You can have the best way with words in the world, but when it comes to career success, it's what you don't say that counts.
Up to 90% of the input that we get is at a subconscious level. The reason it's so important is that
if you want to land more clients, make a stronger first impression, or switch careers with confidence, you need to understand the subtle signs you're giving off and what they say about you.
if it was just a clean green sweater, your chance of getting a favor done was 13.9%. But if you had that sweater with that little logo, tiny little thing, almost 53%.
Former FBI agent Joe Navarro can analyse your every move, from the way your eyes shift around the room to the way you lean in on a Zoom call.
When I was in the FBI, my job was to recruit foreign spies. And you may pick up different body language from each one. Maybe sitting there, touching their neck, covering the suprasternal notch as I'm doing now, which is usually indicative of.
What advice would you give somebody who wants to become truly invaluable to either their clients or their new workplace?
Be that person that is.
Hello and welcome to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy. I'm Gee Footit. If you're ready to find a better and more fulfilling career, this is your go-to resource to start that journey. Joe, a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. You're a non-verbal communications expert and ex-FBI agent. So first of all, why should job switchers or business owners care about non-verbal cues?
Good question. And the reason it's so important is that body language is our first language. You know, when I ask people, what is your first language? Some people might say, well, it's German or French or Italian. And they always get that wrong. And around the world, our first language, our most important language is body language. And it's extraordinary how much we learn about each other, how much we communicate to each other, and how authentic body language tends to be. So whether you're in business or whatever sector in life you're in relationships, body language is really where it's at.
Absolutely. And do you think most of us are aware of these signals that we are putting out there to the world?
You know, that's a profound question because it all depends on how we define awareness. We know that consciously we're aware of very little. There's thousands of things that can be going on as you're walking down the street, but it's the subconscious that really is picking up most of that information. The last estimate I've seen, up to 90% of the input that we get as we're ambulating or doing anything is at a subconscious level, which is profound. That means that sometimes we just literally have to have the person in front of us to say, pay attention to me. That we finally get it. So subconsciously, what has been termed neuroception. In other words, everything from your nose to your skin to the hairs on your arms are picking up wind and the ambiance. All of that is being processed subconsciously. So definitely we're picking up a lot. The question is, which of us are deciphering that? And that's the big difference.
And is it possible for us to fix or work on our nonverbal communication skills?
Absolutely. You can, it's like any skill. You can enhance your ability to decipher others. Take for instance, motherhood. All of a sudden you've got an infant there, and one of the things that we grow through neuroplasticity is our understanding of this little being. When he or she squirms this way or turns this way or makes a face, we begin to associate different sentiments and different needs particular to that specific child. And in everyday life, you can learn, as I did in the FBI, what may look like something very normal, maybe somebody tucking their elbow very tight against their waist, to the average person may seem, well, that doesn't look like anything. But to an officer on the street, it may suggest that the person has a gun, and because they're not experienced, they're tucking that weapon against their side to make sure it doesn't fall out. So you can learn to look for many more behaviors, but you can also learn to decipher those behaviors in real time.
Wow, I would never have thought of an example like that, but given your background, that's really, really poignant, isn't it? Those really subtle cues.
Very
Now,
subtle. Yeah.
yeah, that you can read very, very easily. Now, you may have noticed I haven't been using the term body language. So, can you explain why you prefer nonverbal communication instead?
Yes. So body language is exactly that. It's our gestures, it's our movements, it's our expressions. That's body language. But body language falls under a much broader umbrella. And that broad umbrella is nonverbal communication. So when I speak about nonverbals, I talk about everything that communicates but is not a word. So, the ambiance where I'm at, the clothing that I'm wearing, whether or not I have a Mont Blanc pen in my pocket or a inexpensive big pen. Everything that we attach to ourselves communicates something about us. Even the choice of vehicle that we drive, a Lamborghini versus a Volkswagen, may say something about us. So it's not about making judgments. It's about what we transmit non-verbally, and then of course some of that has to do with our body language. So when I walk into somebody's house, I'm starting to observe, where's this neighborhood? What does the outside of the house look like? What does the parked car or vehicle look like? And then as I come in, I'm analyzing everything. It's all communicating. Now, some people choose to just sort of put blinders on and ignore a lot of things. For me, it just makes life a lot more interesting.
Now, I'm going to go back a couple of moments where you mentioned becoming a parent and your non-verbal communication with that baby. I've actually just become a parent for the second time, not with another child. I've only got one child, but we've just bought a puppy. So I'm
Well,
having
then.
to really think about, I'm trying to read him and he's trying to read me, but he seems to be really calm around me, but he's very playful with my daughter and playful with my husband and biting them. And so I guess they're giving off different vibes than me.
Oh, sure. Sure, and look, after tens of thousands of years, I mean, it's estimated that we started to domesticate canine dogs about 30,000 years ago. We have so bred them that they're actually very good at reading us. They're the only animal that we know of that can actually do many of the same faces that we make. Like if we raise one eyebrow, they can actually raise an eyebrow. Most primates can't even do that. So they are attunely focused on us. But I know this isn't a lecture on dogs, but they are sensitive to who the alpha person is, and they're very sensitive to our emotions, and out of necessity. So don't be surprised if one day when you're not feeling well, they'll immediately come over and put their head on your lap. They're that sensitive to our emotions, and obviously they're very caring.
I'm looking forward to him getting to know us all properly over the next few weeks. Now, you mentioned clothing, cars, things on the outside can tell you as an expert. Is there there's a saying, "Dress for the job" or "Dress for the interview"? Is there an element of truth in that? What would you say to people about that?
Oh, definitely. Hair color, the kind of glasses that we wear all say something, but definitely clothing. There's one thing I've learned from studying both nonverbal behavior and history is that in every society that has ever been studied, the person who was in charge, whether they were the chief or the king or whatever you want to call them, they all dressed differently. They had the sort of what we call in anthropology the plumage of higher status. Look, when the conquistadores arrived in Mesoamerica, they could tell who the king was. They didn't really have to ask. The king sat higher, had an entourage. The clothing that the king wore was very much different, very much more opulent than everybody else. Where did they see that? They had just left Queen Isabella's court. They had just seen it. The same there when Captain Cook arrived in what is now Tahiti. He experienced the same thing. Literally a mile and a half offshore, 2 kilometers out, takes out his what they call spyglass, looked through it, and was able to point out who the king was just from the attire. So in anthropology, we look at behaviors that began to take shape millennia ago, and we know that higher status individuals walked differently, dressed differently, and so when we think about does our clothing matter? Absolutely, it is absolute nonsense to think that our clothing has no effect on others. It absolutely does. In fact, a few years ago, they did a really a very clever experiment, and I'm just going to summarize it here. But basically, they asked people to go into a business or an establishment and get a favor done, or maybe get a meeting with management or with a CEO. And they sent him in wearing a green sweater. Then they replicated the same experiment, and they asked them to wear the same sweater, but this time it had a little 3/4 inch logo of a higher status company, and I think it was a little Tommy Hilfiger sticker. The numbers were so impressive. If it was just a clean green sweater, your chance of getting a favor done or getting through that door was 13.9%. But if you had that sweater with that little logo, tiny little thing, made all the difference, almost 53%.
Wow.
That is an astounding difference. And so, when we knock on somebody's door and they look through the peephole, or they look through the ring camera, or we walk into an office to apply for a job, believe me, it is a part of the requisite, I would add, of our species to assess each other based on how we look, our health. Does our hair look healthy? Do we look healthy? And certainly our attire goes a long way towards that.
Now, I am willing, for the benefit of our listeners and watchers, to be completely vulnerable here, Joe. So tell me what my non-verbal cues are saying about me right now.
Well, one of the things you always take into context is exactly that. Context is like, is this a staged event? Yes, it's staged. You were told you're going to be interviewing this bloke, and I was told that I was going to be interviewed by the famous Gee. So I had to prepare and so forth. So that already begins to set the tone. But obviously, the attire you have, your hair is combed, you have makeup on, as I have makeup on because there's lights in here. And if somebody were to, other than yourself, because just you yourself asking the question affects the experiment. So let's clarify that. If somebody came along and said, okay, let's freeze it, let's go off camera, what do you think of G? My first reaction would be she is, very much filled with what we call alacrity. She, the joy, you can see the joy, you can see the pleasure that she takes in doing this. And this is one of the things that we look for is amiability. The level of alacrity that others have, which make us either comfortable or uncomfortable. So there you have it.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you. Now, you yourself have switched careers. This being a career switch podcast, I thought I'd speak to you about your particular career change. So you were a former FBI agent, and now you are a best-selling author. You've published many, many books. You'll have to tell me what number you're up to now, Joe. You're a public speaker. You are, of course, a communications expert. So what skills or learnings have you taken from your earlier roles that you're still using now? And how did you personally adapt to career change?
Yeah, well, my career change was immediate. I was facing retirement at age 50 from the FBI, and honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I just knew that I was going to be retiring after 25 years. Enough was enough, and I wanted to spend more time with family, relax, less stressful job. And one of the things that I immediately sort of fell in my on my lap is, I had for years been teaching and within the FBI, and so I was invited by some insurance companies to come and talk about, how we can be safer and stuff like that. And over time, that transitioned into others speaking things. But what's interesting is 99%, and I think that is not an exaggeration of what I teach, is applicable outside the forensic arena. Most of my clients are actually in business or the financial sector. And for them, early on, I found that for most businesses, what they cared about was their clients. And so a lot of client facing industries, bring me on board to teach them about how to deal with their clients, how to engage them, how to keep them, how to deal with, for instance, de-escalating issues that may come up, how to negotiate, because most people think negotiations is about numbers, when in reality it's about the same things that I did in the FBI. When you get when I was in the FBI, my job was to recruit foreign spies. If you think selling something is difficult, try selling the idea of defection. And so the skill set of dealing with humans, creating psychological comfort, assessing them for their needs, their wants, their desires, but especially their fears, is invaluable. And for that, really, that's why we study nonverbals. And so I found myself, I was going to transition, but I didn't know what I was going to transition in. I didn't know there was a world out there of speaking engagements and things. I had been buried in my FBI work. But one of the things I found, and I think it may be useful to those who are listening, is that sometimes you can try to create your own trail, and you can, but you also have to listen to what the market forces are telling you. I'll give you an example. A lot of people retiring from the FBI think about doing security work and so forth, or how to deal with violence in the workplace. That is a very limited area of interest. And what I found was that there was this huge area of interest in the area of how we communicate. How do we communicate more empathetically, more authentically, and so forth? And I wasn't about to recreate the needs of the world. I followed those market forces. And that, and of course, there were some things in the forensic arena that I wanted to do. So I wrote a book with Jack Schaefer, co-wrote a book on interviewing. I wrote one on extremists and terrorism, hunting terrorists. But I got a call one day from a guy that had won 11 bracelets at the World Series of Poker, and Phil Hellmuth, and he said, "I'd like for you to come and teach poker tells." And it's like that came out of nowhere. And I'm not a poker player. My family, we weren't allowed to do any kind of gambling. So, but I could certainly teach body language to poker players, and so I did that, and that led to other books. And so now, I have 14 published books. The 15th one has just been turned in, so it'll come out next year. And who knows what next I will transition to. But what I would tell you is that my mind was taking in lots of information, but then looking for opportunities to express that unique knowledge that I had. So
Amazing. So I like the idea of going where your skill set is needed the most and listening, just really listening to that, go where the market needs you. I really like that. So are there any areas in your own nonverbal skills that you've had to adapt through your career change, or any that like weren't serving you at any point?
oh gosh, yes. um you go certainly you go from civilian life. I was a student in college when I was recruited by the FBI. All of a sudden, they came over and they handed me a manila envelope and said, "Fill this out, we want you to join the bureau." And now you're supposed to walk around almost like an archetype, the hero archetype of in Jungian psychology. And how does an FBI agent carry themselves? Well, not like somebody that just left the dorm, I assure you. You really have to carry yourself differently. Your gestures have to be different. They have to be more authoritative. Your voice has to change. I often joke about the first arrest that I made, which to this day it's embarrassing because my voice was so high. Stop! This is the FBI. It's embarrassing. No wonder the guy didn't stop. And the agents I was with said, "Hey, Navarro, buddy, you got to change your voice. You got to find that voice of authority." And for the first time in my life, I realized that you have to have different voices. You have to have a voice of compassion, and you have to have a voice of authority, and you have to have a voice that is unyielding. And when I teach women, I remember years ago I was I think with a women in cable television, huge group of ladies here in the United States. They're all involved in the cable industry, and I talk about how we say the word no, and most of us say the word no too high. It almost sounds like it's negotiable, when in reality, the things that are not negotiable should be said in a lower voice. No, no, that's not going to happen. And people in authority are never taught that. And look at that, taught that. They're not taught that. You have to remember that your voice, what we call prosody, how your voice sounds, is a nonverbal, and it could communicate ambiguity. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so this is one of the things that I had to change. I had to change my voice. I had to change how I carry myself. And then you're talking about parenthood. You have to learn to soften that up when you have a little life that's now in your sphere of influence, and you have a baby, and now there has to be a softer side. And so yeah, there's a lot of things that had to change. And then, how do you remain calm when people are firing bullets at you? I assure you, that's a skill set that, hopefully you go a lifetime without experiencing that. But the first time you experience that, you realize, oh boy, I actually have to remain calm. And so it's a task, and you have to, Shakespeare was right. Life is theater, and you have to rise to the performance. And I would argue that those who can rise to that performance will do the best, and that's part of life.
Absolutely. And some of the things you said earlier around the way you help communication, or the market that was in front of you that needed your services to help them communicate, really resonated, because the St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy helps people become a financial advisor, and of course they're communicating with their clients. And what resonated to me was understanding through their non-verbal communication perhaps some of their fears, or just being on the same page, or seeing the world through their eyes, that empathy. But all of that non-verbal communication you can pick up from them, I think, would be so valuable for any advisor.
I'll give you an example specific to the financial advisory role. You may in the 50s, most of the time you would see maybe one breadwinner. Well, now you may have two breadwinners that are actually earning quite a bit. And what appeals to one partner may not appeal to the other. And, you're sitting there explaining different financial instruments or different strategies, and you may pick up different body language from each one. One, maybe sitting there touching their neck, covering the suprasternal notch, as I'm doing now, which is usually indicative of I have reservations or concerns, or a little bit insecure. And the other one is completely leaning forward. Their feet are in the starter's position. They're ready to sign the papers. And a good financial advisor has to take that into consideration and say, okay, I've got one client that's good to go, but the other one is reticent. Now, one of my jobs as a financial advisor is to determine what are they reticent about. Is it the speed at which this is proceeding? Is it that maybe they don't like me? Is it that the financial instruments haven't been clearly defined, or the tactics, or whatever? But it's incumbent upon you to explore that. And we do that by asking questions. So we ask the person that where we see the doubt and the hesitation, to talk about what they're thinking right now, or what else have you considered? What would be your concerns? And explore that, because the ultimate winner is, and the perfect situation is, if you create psychological comfort and everyone enters into this with psychological comfort. If you enter into an agreement and there's lack of psychological comfort, you're going to have a person that's going to regret that purchase, is going to regret getting involved. That will be the first person that you'll hear them say, I told you so, or any number of other things that take away from that. And so you, as an advisor, you want to learn to read body language. You want to be assured that as we proceed, any concerns that they have, they're being addressed, because humans reveal in real time how our sentiments. If you're driving in a car and you almost hit the car in front of you because they suddenly braked hard, we'll do a cathartic exhale. Oh my goodness. We don't do that a half hour later. We do it the very second it happens. And so our species evolved to reveal in real time, very effectively, very quickly, our true sentiments. But we evolved primarily to reveal those things silently. And as a financial advisor, you have to be in tune with that and realize how important that is.
And then let's flip it on its head then. We need to read the cues from the client, just using the financial advice as an example. But what about the cues we're giving off? How can we improve our skills to make sure that we're making those clients feel at ease?
Great question. And I wish that question was asked of me more often, because we forget our role. Number one is our role is influential. Where are we meeting our clients? Are we waiting for them to finally show up, or are we meeting them at the security desk? If we say that our clients are important, why are we waiting for our client at our desk sitting? When we know they're coming for a 9:00 appointment, why are we still sitting? I ask people, do you want to be average or exceptional? Everybody says they want to be exceptional. That's great. But to be exceptional, you have to do exceptional things. And if you tell me that you've got an important client coming in, you're still sitting in your desk, you're not exceptional, you're average. You're absolutely average. So don't you dare say that you're exceptional. If they're that important and you care that much, you're going to meet them at the earliest place that you can meet them. Now, sometimes that is at the curbside, sometimes it's at the security desk, sometimes it's at reception, but not while you're sitting down. The other thing is, have you put all your devices away? Because if you are, part of the time looking at your phone or your Apple Watch and talking to your client and you're interacting with a lot of people, you're not exceptional. You're not even, you're actually below average. So there's a lot that we can communicate. Do we speak in measured tones to our clients? Some clients may speak very fast. Some want to take their time and explore things at length. That's our responsibility to assess for how do they want that information delivered. When I was being invited to Harvard University for about a decade, I went there every year. And I used to joke, they invited me there in the wintertime because nobody goes to Boston in the wintertime because it was cold. And I would sit there with the class and say, look, you're all business students from around the world. And I said, but you're going to hear this for the first time. Every communication you have has to be different. It has to be shaped to the specific client that you have. And if I prefer storytelling, if I prefer a certain way, modality of receiving information, you better step up to it. If I want to see a chart that is clear and concise, you better deliver that. Things that we take for granted, in the financial sector as well, that's 5 points, 6 points, whatever. But what if I want things, how many dollars is that? I've had people just stop and say, who uses the dollar sign? Well, maybe this client does. If your client is talking about my family, don't you dare mention wife and kids. All that reveals is that you're not listening and you're not empathetic. The word family is powerful and it has meaning, and words have weight. So, when we look at ourselves and we say, are we doing things right? Or are we doing things average? Because this is interesting, Gee. Average gets a paycheck, but exceptional behaviors have influence. And that is the big difference. And so the first thing I always teach is to look at yourself and saying, am I doing things that are just average? Am I dressing the right way? Am I using the words that everybody else uses? Am I not adapting to the situation? How am I making my client feel that they're special and exceptional? And that sometimes takes a lot of coaching because we get by with very little. And I see you scratching your neck, so I'll move on.
No, you've written about the idea of self-mastery. And so I was wondering, you've obviously spoken a lot about that just now. Was there anything else from your learnings or how you help people with self-mastery, particularly from a career change perspective? Because not all of our listeners will be becoming financial advisors. So we want to give them some tips no matter what career they're hoping to transition into.
Yeah, it really doesn't what career you're transitioning from, but what matters is that you have to have mastery over a couple of things, and one of those is knowledge. Right? Have you learned everything you can about that skill set? And it doesn't matter if you're a farmer. Do you know your land? Do you know your crop? Do you know? And I've talked to many farmers, and it's amazing what they know about the weather, the land, the acidity, stuff you can't even imagine. They talk about animals like they're veterinarians. Well, this one needs an injection for this, that. I mean, it's remarkable stuff. Those are the great farmers. So it doesn't matter what you're in, but have you mastered the knowledge? Are you continuing to master? Are you a lifelong learner, or do you take pride in saying, yeah, 3 years ago I read a book? Congratulations. That don't repeat that out loud. The second thing is, have you mastered your emotions? And emotions has a lot to do with how we behave, how conscientious we have. So there's a lot that we can learn, and we have to, no matter where you are in transitioning, is how focused can we be, and how dedicated we are to our craft.
We are in a world where there are lots more of these type of meetings, Joe, virtual. So how can people put themselves across for really positively with a non-verbal view? What things can they do to enhance these type of interactions with people? Because it could be a job interview, it could be a client, whoever it might be. How can we enhance these type of interactions with just this small little window that we have?
Bring the energy to the table that you do. I think you do a great job of bringing that energy to the table. You have to remember, we have a very small screen, and but that doesn't mean we don't change our body language. We emphasize with our eyebrows, we smile, we tilt our head when we're interested in what's being said. What we must not do, and the research is very good on this, what we must not do is hold a still face on a virtual call like this is actually the worst thing that you can do. So there are some changes that have been brought about as a result of COVID. We're now, I'd say 90% of my calls are in a virtual environment. And we have to remember, yeah, we're talking to that little dark spot that's the camera, but don't stop being yourself. Be generous with your expressions. Remember, your gestures out here can't be seen, so they have to be here. You have to emphasize a little differently, but get used to it, because the world is not going to go back to talking on the phone. I think the only one I talk to on the phone is my mother. So that's how much things have changed.
It's interesting, isn't it? And now more than ever, we're tapped into a much wider world. Um, so how can we connect with people from different cultures through our nonverbals?
Yeah, very good question. We have to recognize that culture does affect communication. For instance, there are cultures where everybody talks at the same time. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work all in everywhere else. There are many cultures where, it's all about turn yielding. There are cultures that are hierarchical, that the oldest person, thank God I'm old now. So usually I'm afforded the first courtesy. For instance, in Japan and China and Vietnam, the oldest person is given the first opportunity to talk, and then others are given that opportunity. Culture affects where we can look. Culture affects how long we can talk and how we express ourselves. So one of the things I always look at is, before you go somewhere, For instance, let's say you grew up in London, and all of a sudden, or Sweden, and now all of a sudden you're going to Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. Just keep in mind, you may come from a culture where we look at each other comfortably for about 2 to 3 seconds, but we may now be in a culture where it is not unusual to be stared at for 7 to 10 seconds, and that is considered normal. Well, you may feel apprehensive, or it may make you feel uncomfortable, and yet in other cultures that's very normal. So culture does affect where we look, who talks, turn yielding, many other things.
Now, I was going to say to you about nonverbal communication that many of our listeners could be tapping into this, maybe not for the first time, but it might be something that they're quite unconscious about at the moment. So I feel like people have to move their awareness of something that they want to improve from unconscious to conscious, consciously be aware of things or how you may improve. So what are some first steps for somebody to take away that they can start to analyze themselves and start to maybe improve some of their unconscious biases, I suppose, or their communication in an unconscious way? What would you recommend?
Start with looking at what we call pacifying or self-adapting behaviors. So a lot of times when something is bothering us or we're troubled, we'll touch our neck, we'll touch our face, we'll wring our hands, and maybe we'll compress our lips. We certainly want to look at those things in the person we're talking to, because they're usually displays of what we call psychological discomfort. Something's in their mind, something, maybe they need to speed things along, maybe they're concerned, or they're worried, or any number of things. So just divide up body language at the basic level of its positively valenced or negatively valenced, or its comfort and discomfort. But then bring it into yourself. And if every time a client asks me a question and I have to ventilate, pull on my collar to answer that, or I have to touch my face and so forth, what I'm transmitting is that I have doubts, that I am not secure, that perhaps it's even interpreted as less trustworthy. That's huge. And I've seen people who, out of habit, ventilate every time they answer a question. Don't do that, because what you're saying is, in essence, at a subconscious level, I have to ventilate to process information. So maybe I'm not as trustworthy as you think I am. So you really have to evaluate yourself and be honest. And of course, nowadays it's really easy. You just plop up your phone and film yourself for about 10 minutes while you're on a virtual call and say, what don't I like about that? Maybe it's the way I was sitting, maybe the way I was gesturing, whatever it is. Get rid of those adaptive behaviors, those pacifiers, and just focus on the body language, including, by the way, your gestures. You can have very weak gestures. I had a client a few years ago. She, not going to name her, but she'll recognize this, who would begin to talk and her hands would go like this. And one day I said to her, that looks like an upside down egg beater. And I said, you don't want to do that. And so we literally worked on the hand gestures of the confident, of the illustrator. They're finite, powerful hand gestures that demark and enhance communication. So all of these things are factors. People ask me, well, do you have things that stand out that you wish you didn't do? Yeah, sometimes I use my hands too much. Sometimes on my podcasts, people say your hand gestures are distracting. Well, you know what? At my age, I'm not going to change, but maybe I should have when I was younger. So
I love
we could
that.
all use some coaching. Yeah.
Yeah, we're never the finished article, are we? And I really like the
No.
advice of record yourself, actually take a look at yourself. And I think people don't take time to do that. But if you are considering a career change, it would be great advice to actually record yourself. If you're going to have an interview or something, record yourself first and have a look at it. There could be ums and ahs that you can take out and easy fixes. So good luck with that. So I've got a couple of quick fire questions to finish off with, Joe. The first one is the most invaluable piece of advice you've ever received, the kind of advice that stuck with you either throughout your life or your career. Is there anything that comes to mind?
One of the most powerful things that I ever heard was from a friend of mine. He actually was a defense attorney, and he was the defense attorney on a spy case that he had defended the client. So in essence, we were sort of the enemies. I'm on the prosecution side. He was on the defense side. And as I was getting ready to retire, and he had heard about some job offers that I had received from some attorneys to work with them and how to work with witness testimony and so forth. I'll never forget him. He drew me aside and he says, "Joe, you've got a great reputation in this town." He said, "Don't do anything that would compromise that." And every time I get invited to go speak here, go do this, participate in that, it's one of the first things I ask myself, would this undo all that hard work, my reputation? And I can tell you I've turned many things down because I wasn't going to let anything usurp my reputation. So career-wise, yeah, definitely that.
Great piece of advice. And one final question. What advice would you give somebody who wants to become truly invaluable to either their clients or their new workplace?
Be that person that is genuinely and benignly curious. Benign curiosity will carry you so far. Get to know them. Know everybody. When I walk into a building, I shake hands with the security guard. I make friends with the receptionist, with the secretary or the assistant. Get to know everyone. Be genuinely curious about them and their life, and it will pay you back handsomely. Maybe that's not the advice you expected, but it has paid me back so well all of my life.
Fantastic. Thank you. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Again, we've worked with each other before, so I knew I was going to enjoy today. So thank you for coming. Where can people find you or reach out to you and find your latest book, etc.? How can they reach out to you?
You can just go to joenavarro.net, and that'll take you to my website and all my books and all my YouTube videos, and all of that stuff is there. And it's good to see you again, Gee.
Thank you. A big thanks to Joe for joining us on the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of The Switch, make sure to follow, rate, and share it with someone who's ready for a career change. And if you're on your own journey, hit subscribe. We've got plenty more inspiration and insight coming your way. I'm Gee Footit, and you've been listening to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy.